Hey, what up YouTube, and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. In today's video, I will be going over my predictions for the upcoming week of football. We've got the start of the Premier League season. This is a final season to kick off in England. We've got some games across the pyramid down to the National League North and South, and also a special treat for you all, some hand-selected, hand-picked preliminary round games, which I'm going to predict as well. So we've got quite a lot to get through. Let's get straight into it with Liverpool, who are kicking us off at Anfield at home to AFC Bournemouth. Liverpool will be looking to start this season much like they did the last one, as in they had a great season winning the title last time round and were completely dominant. They're at home up against Bournemouth. I'm going to have to back Liverpool to win this one fairly comfortably. 3-0 to Liverpool. Aston Villa versus Newcastle United. I will be doing my Premier League predictions tomorrow evening. A bit of an other way around situation going on there. But in terms of the reason why is because of the amount of games that we've got to predict tonight. But I will give you a little tease. I am predicting Newcastle United to have quite a poor season. I'm not going to say where, but I'm predicting them to have quite a poor season. And I think you've got to say it's a bad situation at the moment. And Villa are a very strong side. At Villa Park, I'm going to have to back Aston Villa to win this one. 4-1. Brighton and Hove Albion at the Amex hosting Fulham. Two relatively even sides. I'm not going to lie with this one. I think either side could come away with points in. I'm going to back home advantage. I usually do in the opening stages. Tend to tip it a bit more that favour. 2-1 to Brighton. Sunderland are back in the Premier League after a long wait now. They were a stalwart, so to speak, of the Barclays Premier League era, and then ended up in League One for a few seasons. But they are now back, and they're hosting at Stadium and Light against West Ham United. I do have a feeling that Sunderland won't necessarily find it too easy to jump up, but I think we're going to see a 2-2 draw in this one. A valuable point on the opening day of the season for the Black Cats. Tottenham Hotspur versus Burnley. Well, Spurs have changed manager. They've now got Thomas Frank, so they'll be hoping that improves their league form, as they were actually almost relegated last season and yet somehow got Champions League football through winning at the Europa League. They lost the Super Cup the other day against PSG. They're hosting against Burnley this time round. I'm going to have to go with Spurs to win this one by 2-1. I just don't think Burnley are good enough to be able to stay up in the Premier League overall. They've not proven it the last few times they've been in here anyway. Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Manchester City at Molineux. We all know that Manchester City will be looking to come back with some vengeance this season and try and secure the title once again. We're better off to start that campaign than travelling to the Wolverhampton Wanderers side, which were mired in a relegation scrap last season. I'm going to have to go with Man City to win this one by 2-1. My beloved Derby County are up next as we go into the Championship, as they are hosting an earlier kickoff Coventry City. A bit of a household derby here for me in terms of my parents, my best friend, my cousins are all Coventry fans, and I'm a Lone Ranger and a Derby fan. I'm going to go and see this game with my dad. I'm going to sneak him into the home end, but should be a good, cracking game to watch. You've got Frank Lampard, who started his managerial career with Derby County, now in charge of Coventry, and Derby County's manager John Eustace started his playing career with Coventry City. So both of them have precedence with the other team. I do think Derby will be slow to start the season, but I do actually have confidence in this. The EFL Cup game, last minute scream over free kick, bend it like Beckham, more like bend it like Joe Ward. And we've got each week that goes by, we just get stronger and stronger. We tend to do quite well against home against Coventry over the last few years. We're one of them teams which, if we can be annoying to play against, can't probably win this one. So I am going to go with a 2-0 win for the Rams. I'm hoping to see that. It'll be very celebration mood if we see that performance on Saturday. Portsmouth are hosting Norwich City. I had Portsmouth as a dark horse, and I do feel Norwich potentially have an outside chance in the playoffs. I think it might be a difficult game for either side to get something from it, with two very defensively sound teams. We're going to go with a 0-0 draw in this occasion. Wrexham versus West Bromwich Albion to wound up the early kickoffs. West Brom, I'm going to have to back to win this one. I think Wrexham aren't good at holding out a lead at the moment. And I'm just seeing West Brom to be able to edge this one. I think they may be a playoff contender this season. 2-1 to the Baggies. Blackburn Rovers versus Birmingham City. Both of these teams used to have John Eustace manager, and now they're useless. Useless. See what I did? Okay. I apologise for that joke unreservedly. It is at Ewood Park. It's going to be quite end-to-end stuff, I imagine. I don't know if Travis will start. There's lots of rumours linking him to Derby, but if he's still at the club come Saturday, then I imagine he would. I'm going to go Blackburn to win this one 4-2. We covered Birmingham City on a live stream yesterday, so go and watch that out if you haven't. They very much impressed me going forward in terms of the goalkeeper and some of the defensive things, a bit questionable in that regard. And if you look against a team which is more composed on the ball, it could be an interesting game. Bristol City versus Charlton Athletic. Opening day of the season for Bristol City. Oh my days. A 4-1 win against Sheffield United. How many people actually saw that on the cards? They're at home up against a Charlton side who are newly promoted. Going to have to back a Robins for a second win on the season in this league. 2-1 to Bristol City at Ashton Gate. Millwall are hosting Middlesbrough. A tough game at the Den. It always is. And I do feel like Rob Edwards is not the right man to be in charge of Middlesbrough. I've made that clear on this channel before. I think you look at Millwall, and I'm going to have to back them to win a 1-0 win. It's not going to be a pretty one, but it's a very typical Dens-like performance. Preston North End versus Leicester City. Preston, I think, are going to be battered from pillar to post this start of the season anyway, especially against the Leicester side, who at the moment are really hoping for an instant return. Certainly recover some points early doors so that the 9 points doesn't affect them too badly. I think Leicester City to win this one by 3-0. Sheffield Wednesday versus Stoke City. We actually saw an interesting game last time round in terms of in the league, where Sheffield Wednesday managed to somehow almost cause an upset by beating Leicester, only to throw it away in the dying embers of the game. They then, in the midweek, managed to get past Bolton on a penalty shootout with a fantastically end-to-end game. I do think at Hillsborough here, at home, we could see a bit of grit and determination. Maybe I didn't give that as much credence as maybe I should have. I know Sheffield Wednesday to beat Stoke on the opening day, 2-0. Swansea City versus Sheffield United. Sheffield United desperately need something to start their season. I thought they looked abject against Birmingham City. I didn't watch the Bristol versus Birmingham, but Bristol versus City versus Sheffield United game. But the scoreline sort of tells you all you need to know. They were tore apart. So a much needed win is needed for the Blades at current. And I do think they could get this. I'm going to go a 2-1 win for Sheffield United to kickstart their season. Watford versus Queen's Park Rangers. Both of these may have aspirations of some sort of playoff finish. I just don't think either will get it and be a bit mediocre mid-table. A 0-0 draw in between this one. Very dull, very boring. Burton Albion versus Port Vale. This is the sort of game which is a bit of a local derby of sorts. You know, they're both in Staffordshire. They're not too far away from each other. It's at the Pirelli, but I do think Darren Moore's side might get a win in this one. At present, they've only picked up 1 point. So I think it's going to be a close game, a 1-0 win for Port Vale. Exeter City versus Mansfield Town. I actually have been pleasantly surprised by Exeter's start. They're currently 1 win and 1 loss, but they beat Cheltenham in the EFL Cup. They then ended up beating Blackpool last time in the league 4-1, a result I definitely did not see coming. They're at home to a Mansfield side managed by Nigel Clough, so a decent sort of manager, but has lost the opening 2 games very narrowly, mind you, both of them by 2-1. But I am going to say Exeter to win this one at St James's Park 2-0. Barnsley versus Bolton Wanderers. Bolton have had a bit of a hectic start already to this season, so to speak. They had a 3-3 draw up against Sheffield Wednesday in the League Cup. They lost against Stockport County on the opening day 2-0, only to then turn it around and impress against Plymouth Argyle, where they won 2-0 in that one. It's been a bit of a helter-skelter performance-wise, and they're up against a Barnsley side who has started flipping amazingly. They defensively, I don't think they're quite sure, but they've had back-to-back wins. They beat Burton Albion 3-2, and then in the opener 3-1 against Plymouth. They're certainly a side that I think going forward are looking great at the moment. I'm going to have to go for a high-scoring 4-1 win for the Tykes. Blackpool versus Huddersfield. Another team who is full of high energy and desire at the moment is Huddersfield Town, who beat Leicester City on penalties yesterday, which, again, quite something. They won their opening 2 games. They've kept a clean sheet in both their opening games. So certainly an interesting one. I think we could see, though, a bit of a surprise. I think Blackpool have lost back-to-back and will need something to recover how poor they've been at the start of this season. I'm going to have to go with a 2-2 draw here because I don't feasibly see Blackpool languishing in the relegation zone all season. Bradford City versus Luton Town. I suspect Luton will win the title. They've been great so far in the opening start. It's a difficult game, though, against Bradford, who, let's not forget, of course, that shock upset the other night against Blackburn Rovers in the EFL Cup. I think looking at this, though, I am going to have to back the Hatters to win this one. 1-0 to Luton. Cardiff City versus Rotherham United. This may well have been a championship occasion at one point. Cardiff are currently unbeaten in the league. Well, in all competitions, actually. They beat Swindon Town 2-1 as well, which didn't come as too much of a surprise. Rotherham bit inconsistent of late. They only drew 0-0 against Salford and had to rely on penalties to get them out of that. They've been narrowly in each game. It's only been a one goal swing either way. I just think Cardiff will win this one at home. 2-0 to the Bluebirds. Doncaster Rovers versus Wycombe Wanderers. There's a lot of hype surrounding Doncaster, and understandably so. They've won the opening 2 games in the league, 1-0 against Exeter and 2-1 against Mansfield. But even better was their absolute cruising, dominating performance, beating Middlesbrough 4-0, which I don't think anyone saw on the cards. Because, yeah, it certainly was something. Maybe they'll have a bit of a leveler coming into this one against a Wycombe side, which desperately needs some points, having not picked up a single point all season. Were dumped out the EFL. Actually, no, but they did turn it around in the EFL Cup, rather, against Leyton Orient. It was only a 1-0 win, but maybe that's what they've needed to kickstart their season. I'm going to go 2-0 to Wycombe Wanderers. Leyton Orient versus Stockport County. Leyton Orient in 16th. They obviously were in the playoffs last season, as were Stockport. So you'll suspect this game will be a tight one. But Stockport have been a much better team come the start of the season. Have won all 3 of their opening games. And I just think you look at it, the opening game, 2-0 against Bolton, 3-1 against Crewe Alexandra in the League Cup, 2-1 against Wycombe. They've been difficult games to start. I think it is away from home. I am going to go with a 2-2 draw because I think both of these teams did overperform slightly last season. But if there's one team at the moment who's looking to prove me wrong on that, it's Stockport County. Lincoln City versus Plymouth Argyle at Sincil Bank. Plymouth have started the season very poorly, much like they were last season. They did beat QPR in the League Cup yesterday, but they've always been good in cup competitions. Hasn't necessarily translated into the league at present, but it did have a bit of fight back ability during that game because they did come from behind. I think they may get their opening point of the season here. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw against the Lincoln side, who've been inconsistent. They won 3-1 against Harrogate in the Cup, lost 2-0 to Wimbledon, but won on the opening day 2-0 against Reading. So I've been, as you can tell, very inconsistent. Reading versus AFC Wimbledon, talking about both of these clubs just a moment ago. Reading have been by far the worst team so far at the start of this season. I mean, they did knock Pompey out the EFL Cup, so that may start a change in direction. But 2-0 against Huddersfield, 2-0 against Lincoln. They're currently bottom of the league. They've lost a lot of quality, really. They lost Nibs recently, and you've got to think that's going to be something that is going to really weaken that side in an offensive play. They're up against a Wimbledon side who, I'm not going to lie, have looked mixed, but in terms of, I think overall, slightly more favour Wimbledon with this one. 3-0 AFC Wimbledon, which is maybe a bit of a shock, but I'm going to go with it. Stevenage versus Northampton Town. I think Northampton are going to be relegated this season. Stevenage have started the season like a house on fire. 1-0 against Rotherham, 3-2 against Blackpool, both from league, and they absolutely eased past Charlton. Charlton eased past them, rather. So they didn't really focus on the cup, but in terms of the league, they've certainly been pushing themselves up. Northampton only picked up 1 point so far out of the opening 2 games. It was a 0-0 against Bradford City. Pretty dull, boring game, but lost 3-1 against Wigan. And, I mean, they lost 1-0 against Southampton, which is no disgrace, to be honest. I think Stevenage win this one at home. We've got to go 2-0 to Stevenage. I think Northampton Town will be relegated this season. I just can't see them staying up. Wigan Athletic versus Peterborough United. Another team who may be very much in jeopardy of relegation is Peterborough United, who lost the opening 2 games of the season. They've been, quite frankly, embarrassing at current. They lost 2-0 against Luton Town, which, okay, that's not the issue. 2-1 against Accrington Stanley in the League Below and the League Cup. And, I mean, they have had a difficult start. They've been up against Cardiff and against Luton. You couldn't have a much harder start, but they're now up against Wigan, who should be able to be beaten potentially. They've been inconsistent so far. They tend to beat teams which are lower down the table, losing against the stronger ones. So I am going to go for that reason. Wigan to win this one by 3-0. On to League 2, you've got Chesterfield versus Bristol Rovers. I've backed Chesterfield for the League 2 title, and understandably so. And I think they're going to continue their winning, their sort of winning momentum, so to speak, at the moment. They won the opening 2 league games up against Barrow and Cheltenham. Have been fairly comfortable in them. I think they are a side that, for me, they're doing things in the right way now, and I'm going to have to back them for a 3-2 win against Bristol Rovers, who, I mean, we can talk about them if you want. They've lost the opening 2 games in the league and then lost against Cambridge in the cup as well. They've really, I mean, all of the games have been fairly narrow they've been in, so they have stayed in games. It's just at the moment they've not looked good enough to win them. Oldham Athletic versus Swindon Town. 2 draws for Oldham Athletic. Swindon, a win and a loss. So roughly, in terms of ability, roughly the same. I'm going to have to say Swindon to win this one, because they've now got momentum with them behind the home. They're not at home, are they? What I'm saying. But yeah, you look at the sides of Oldham. I mean, they couldn't even get past the preliminary round for one of the EFL Cup against an Accrington Stanley side, and then they've been very narrowing is. I just think Swindon wins this one 3-1. I'll stop waffling. Barnet versus Walsall. Barnet looking for their opening point. I think they might do it against the Walsall side, who, again, are their thoughts does dwell a bit on the past. I think they've been in all the games fairly narrowly. I mean, they're involved in a penalty shootout the other night against Stoke. 1-1 draw here. Could see Barnet potentially kickstart their season a point at home to a very challenging Walsall side last season. Barrow versus Notts County. Feasibly, I mean, Barrow have lost the opening 2 games in the league. Notts County have only picked up a draw in their opening 2 in the league. I'm going to have to say a draw in this one, a 1-1 draw. I don't think either of these sides are particularly the strongest teams in League 2 at the moment. So, yeah. Bromley versus Fleetwood Town. Talk about strong teams in the league. Fleetwood Town absolutely doing a great job at the moment. They sort of do actually start playing maybe a bit more than they have in the past. They beat Bristol Rovers 2-1, which is a great result in terms of that one. They beat Barnet on their opening day. So yeah, it's one of them ones that I think they were very narrowly in the game. I think it was a penalty shootout, wasn't it? They lost against Barnsley. So they've been staying tight in games. But I look at Bromley, and again, they've also been decent. And that momentum, let's talk for a moment about that. Managed to beat Ipswich Town on a penalty shootout. The confidence that will do them. And at home again, 1-0 to Bromley with this one. I just think there's so much confidence around that club at the moment. You can't knock it. You really can't. I think there's a really good bit of momentum building at the South London club. Cambridge United versus Harrogate Town. Harrogate have been decent at the start of this season, slightly better than Cambridge, not by huge margins, admittedly. I think Cambridge may be able to steer a win in this one because, I mean, they've been in every game quite close at present in the league. So, yeah, I think that we are going to see another close game. A 2-1 win for Cambridge on this one. Crewe Alexandra versus Crawley Town. Crewe have been the best team to start this season at the moment. I mean, we're going to remove the EFL Cup one because it was against a difficult Stockport side. But they beat Accrington Stanley 2-0, beat Salford City on the opening day 3-1. I think they've been absolute blueprint of how to get success at this level, you know, down to a T. And they're up against a Crawley team who is the textbook of how to lose at this level. So they lost to Newport, lost 3-0 to Grimsby, lost to Swansea in a display that they were just trying to muscle and fight, and no technical ability displayed in it. I think Crewe win this one 1-0. I think it'll be a scrappy game but you got to win them scrappy games if you want to do well at this level, and Crewe will very much win it. Grimsby Town versus Newport County. I rate Grimsby at the start of the season, and I have no regrets on that. Beating Shrewsbury Town 3-1 in the EFL Cup. They've now got a tie against Man United to look forward to at home. A 3-0 win over Crawley Town, as we just mentioned. An exhilarating 3-3 draw with Harrogate, as they were dead and buried at one point. And they've shown that determination. They're up against the Newport side, which have started the season really well. I mean, the goalkeeping standards are really high at the club. And there's a lot of headaches, actually, how good this team is. I think it'll be a close game. I'm going to have to back Grimsby for a 1-0 win. MK Dons versus Cheltenham Town. Paul Warren's MK Dons. 0-0 draw on the opening day, but since then have been locked solid. They are up against a Cheltenham side, which, again, hasn't looked solid. I've put them as a surprise encounter for a relegation battle this season. Maybe beating Exeter in the EFL Cup rather will give them some confidence, but in the league they have been not dreadful, but they've just not been able to win at the moment. I think another competitive game, 3-2 to MK Dons. Salford City versus Accrington Stanley. Accrington Stanley, Salford City. Yeah, I'm not convinced on either of these two teams to begin the season overly. I think Accrington Stanley to win this one, 2-1. I think they'll do enough to stay up Accrington in this season, maybe a mid-table season, but not much more than that. On to Shrewsbury Town versus Colchester United. Colchester United did well last season and could do again so this season. They've had 2 draws on their opening day. Just a case of not bearing their chances at the moment. But they are up against a Shrewsbury side who they could definitely get past, because I think Shrewsbury haven't been great since coming in. It's still a huge work in progress. They lost 3-1 to Grimsby in the EFL Cup the other night. Tranmere Rovers smashed them 4-0. I think they have been a bit embarrassing at times. A 0-0 draw against Bromley on the opening day. They need to put all of that to bed, and I think they will do so in this one. 3-2 to Shrewsbury Town. Tranmere Rovers versus Gillingham. Surprise package a bit for me. Tranmere seems so high up. They are up against a Gillingham side, which are equally a side which has proven themselves decent so far. I think we are going to see a competitive 1-1 draw in this one. On to the National League. We have a Greater Manchester derby, ladies and gentlemen. Rochdale versus Altrincham. I mean, I'm not going to focus on the opening games too much. I don't want to particularly do that. So I'm just going to go through some of the ones. I think Rochdale may have an eye on the title this season. And for that reason, at home at Spotland Stadium, 3-0 to Rochdale. Did I get the stadium right there? If I got that wrong, I could. No, it is a Spotland Stadium. So, yeah, 3-0 for Dale. I think you've got to look at the team. Jimmy McNulty has done a decent job to get Rochdale in this position. Yeah, 3-0. Aldershot Town versus Boston United. Very hard to call out what Boston are going to do this season, because their first game of the season was suspended against Morecambe. So this is actually going to be their first game of the season. Away to Aldershot. Aldershot lost their opening game, but it was a very narrow 3-2 loss. Very exciting game, actually. All things considering, up against Altrincham on that opening day. I think, again, it's going to be another close loss for Aldershot. I think Boston to win this one, 2-1. Carlisle United versus Boreham Wood. I feel like Carlisle United's home ground could be a real asset and fortress this season, because think of how far it takes for Boreham Wood to get to Carlisle. That is a long way to go, especially seeing they got promoted last season. Boreham Wood and Carlisle got relegated. I just think a bit of golfing class here. Carlisle to win this one by 2-1. Eastleigh versus Gateshead. I think We are going to see a fairly even game on this one. Eastleigh do tend to have a relatively better head-to-head against Gateshead. I'm going with a 1-1 draw, though. Onto Forest Green Rovers versus Yeovil Town. One of the closer games for these two teams this season. Forest Green Rovers at home. It would not be a surprise to see Forest Green Rovers run for a title this season. And for that reason, a 2-1 win for Forest Green. Hartlepool United versus Braintree Town. Braintree did a phenomenal job on the opening day of the season, smashing Halifax 3-0 in a very shock result. I mean, Halifax reached the playoffs last season, and I think they may be difficult on the road to beat as well. A 0-0 draw up against Hartlepool. Are Braintree going to really shock a lot of people this season? At the moment, you could say so. Scunthorpe versus Woking. Yeah, I mean, Woking are one of them teams that just end up in mid-table because they get some results against some of them stronger teams. And you look about it, they're up against the likes of Scunthorpe, who probably have an eye on the playoffs. I'm going to go with Woking 2-0 winners here, which is pretty mad to say, but you look at it, Scunthorpe have got high aspirations and don't necessarily have to play up against a team like Woking. It will make it difficult. Southend United versus Tamworth. They both had eyes potentially in the playoffs at the start of the season, and then accordingly, both sort of at the end of the day, Southend did better on the opening day. Actually, Southend did very well on the opening day, winning 3-0 against Gateshead. I mean, you got to look at that and potentially back Southend for that one, that Roots Hall now. I'm going to have to back Southend again. 2-0 for the Shrimpers. Sutton United versus Solihull Moors. Solihull Moors drew in the opening game, as did Sutton United. Could be a fairly even game here. I'm going to edge out home advantage. 1-0 Sutton United. Wealdstone versus Halifax Town. As I just mentioned earlier, the Shaman had a horrendous opening day of the season, and they're now travelling to Wealdstone, which is a difficult place for a lot of teams to go, actually. And you look at their opening game, they surprised a lot of people. Well, I don't know if it was a surprise, but they travelled to Truro and managed to, hosted Truro and won 2-0. So have a spring in their step. They've made a lot of signings recently, a lot of solid ones as well. And I'm going to back again Wealdstone to win this one. 3-1 to the Stones. Truro City versus York City. I did mention that Truro may be a home fortress, and it's a difficult game to defend against York, having them being so good last season, although they did draw the opening day of a campaign against Sutton United in maybe a bit of a disappointing fashion. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. I think the game's going to be dragged out, and I just think Truro will clutch a point up. AFC Telford United versus Curzon Ashton. In the National League North we go. And Curzon Ashton have established themselves for a long time at this level now. Telford are back. And both of these drew the opening game of the season 1 apiece. I'm going to go with a more established club at this level of Curzon Ashton to win this one by 3-2, but I think it'll be a very entertaining game at the Bucks Head. Alfreton Town versus Darlington. In a weekend that marks a doubleheader of a Derbyshire side hosting Northeastern sides, we've got Alfreton versus Darlington. Both probably have an eye on the playoffs. I mean, Alfreton had a draw in the opening day against it was against Bedford, wasn't it? Darlington lost the opening game of the season in a relatively close game, all things considering. It was only a 3-2 loss, so it was an end-to-end game really. And I'm looking at it at North Street. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here, another draw for the Reds. But I look at that side and I do think they have the possibility to do well. It was a well-worked goal which they had to for, I think it was the second equaliser one for Alfreton. They certainly work as a good cohesive unit. Chorley versus Chester. Both of these teams do think they'll be able to maybe inhabit the top three coming into the season. It's at Victory Park. It's going to be a difficult one this early on to call. It's 4th v 5th. I'm going to go with home advantage. 3-2 to Chorley, but it really could go either way. On to Hereford versus Kings Lynn Town. Both of these teams had an eye on the playoffs last season. I think, did Kings Lynn get it in the end? I can't remember. But in terms of this game at Edgar Street, I think it may be a bit of a bold snooze fest, a 0-0 draw. Not what the fans want to hear at all. Leamington versus South Shields. We know Leamington are home to South, long way for South Shields to go, of course. And Leamington can be a different beast when at home. South Shields did start the season with a 1-0 win, which, again, not that bad altogether. But yeah, I think they'll be a bit inconsistent this season, South Shields. Leamington to win this one 2-0. Marine versus Buxton. I've got to say, I've got to back Buxton for this one. They started the season well with a win and up against the Marine side, which I think could be in danger of relegation this season. 4-1 to Buxton. Totally dominant display yet again from the Bucks. Oxford City versus Macclesfield. Macclesfield, I think, are one of them teams that a lot of people got predicted for winning the title, potentially, but I think maybe a bit difficult. And I think such a game as Oxford City, travelling to a ground like that, I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. I just don't think Macclesfield are going to live up to as much of the hype as people let on. Peterborough Sports versus Merthyr Town. These two teams probably will end up in mid-table come the end of the season. They did have two different starts to the season. Merthyr winning theirs by 2-0 and Peterborough losing by 3-2. But I think this is going to be a 0-0 draw. I think it's going to be a well thought out game. But I don't think either will be able to break the deadlock. Radcliffe versus Spennymoor Town. I think Radcliffe are going to be relegated this season. I'm sorry. I just do. And you're looking against a team like Spennymoor, which did a fantastic job on the opening day, winning 2-0. It's one of them ones that I'm just got to say that Spennymoor may well and truly charge for the playoffs this season. 4-2 to Spennymoor. Scarborough Athletic versus AFC Fylde. Fylde will be looking for an instant return, and I do think it is highly likely. I think Fylde will this one 2-1 away. Scarborough's got that situation at the moment where they're not actually playing at home ground. Ground staying at Bridlington, a much smaller stadium and a smaller pitch as well. And Fylde, I think, will dominate them because it's much more of a neutral territory at present. Southport versus Bedford Town. I'm going to go with another draw for Bedford to make that back-to-back. A 0-0 draw in this one, giving Southport the first point they need of this season. Worksop Town versus Kidderminster Harriers. I've seen Worksop before, and they impressively played. Against Kidderminster side, though, it is certainly a difficulty and definitely a step up from the Northern Premier League as well. I'm going 0-0 draw. I think it will be one of them ones that nice football being played, but the goalkeepers ultimately just won't be challenged. On to the National League South, got ASC Toten versus Tunbridge Angels. This, I think, is a very good litmus paper test. Something like that. And that'll really tell if Toten can adapt to this level. Because they did win their opening game 3-2, which, okay, respect, but it was up against, I think it's against was it against Dover on the opening day? Yeah, against Dover Athletic. So they're both newly promoted teams. And on that thing, this is like their first real test against a established National League South side. I'm going with a 0-0 draw. I think they will be able to hold out. I don't think Tonbridge will do that well this season, but we shall see. Bath City versus Dover Athletic. I think Dover needs something from this one, as does Bath. I think both of these teams will be flying for it. Bath got an opening point on their season opener, and Dover, obviously, as we just mentioned, lost. We're going with a 2-2 draw at Twerton Park. Chesham United versus Farnborough. Chesham, cheeky playoff charge potentially this season. Who knows? They did win their opening game in season 2-1. Again, one of them ones that was very impressive. It was against the Maidenhead side, which I don't think anyone entirely anticipated. I think we're going to have another 2-1 win for Chesham here up against Farnborough. Dorking Wanderers versus Hampton Richmond Borough. I'm going to have to back Dorking to absolutely demolish Hampton Richmond Borough, even though they were relatively even with 2 draws, like the 2 teams getting both draws on the opening day of the season. 4-2 for Dorking Wanderers. Eastbourne Borough versus Hornchurch. I think this one could be fairly even. Hornchurch won the opening day and Eastbourne drew. But at the same time, I look at Eastbourne and I look at a side that I think will be wanting to be up there in the mix towards the end of the season. I'm going with a 1-1 draw here at Priory Lane. Ebbsfleet United versus Chippenham Town. I thought maybe Ebbsfleet would have taken a while to adjust, but they were, no, boom, straight into it. 2-0 win, opening day of the season. Bam. Admittedly, it was against Dagenham and Redbridge, who also had a poor season last season. So, again, another typical National League South test, and I think Ebbsfleet are going to absolutely rise to the occasion at home. 3-0 to Fleet. Enfield Town versus Maidenhead United. I think Maidenhead were poor on the opening day, and I think they will be poor in this one. No attacking threat, and up against an Enfield team who were equally as poor on the opening day, losing 3-1, no less, against Torquay United. I know that's a difficult opening day, but even so, Enfield, I think, a real danger this season. A 0-0 draw for Enfield Town at home, which may be a surprise for the Bucks. Horsham versus Worthing. You look at Horsham, they're a side which is new to this league. But I must say, started the season not as well as maybe you thought. It was only a 1-0, mind you. It was only 1-0 up against Chelmsford City. But they will be looking for their first win at home. You know, it's actually still called the Camping World Stadium, Horshams. Because I think it was at one point called the Camping World Stadium. It's now the Fusion Aviation Community Stadium. There you go, different sponsorship for you. Yeah, there's a bit of a Sussex derby as well, isn't it? 3-1 for Horsham in this situation. Maidstone United versus Torquay United. Both of these teams will have an eye on the playoffs this season. I'm going to have to go home advantage. I don't think it'll be an overly thrilling game, and I don't think either of them will come out on top. But I think Maidstone may just nick it in a 1-0 win in the 89th minute. Salisbury versus Dagenham and Redbridge. I think you look at these two teams. Salisbury drew the opening game and Dagenham and Redbridge lost. And that's just telling you, in terms of the situation that's currently Salisbury's ahead of Dagenham and Redbridge, you got to think, what has happened to Dagenham and Redbridge? I'm going with a 0-0 draw here because I just don't see Dagenham getting a win. Slough Town versus Hemel Hempstead Town. The Tudors versus the Rebels. Ensuing civil war and unfolding in front of us, potentially. Hopefully not too physical altercations, please. Hemel Hempstead are travelling to Slough Town's ground, and this could probably be a bit of a mid-table game. Let's be honest. They both drew their opening game, and I'm going to go with Hemel Hempstead to win this one 1-0. Weston-super-Mare versus Chelmsford City. We could see Weston-super-Mare really utilise their home ground as a fortress this season. I know they did a solid job there last season. And up against a Chelmsford City side who I'm not entirely sure where their aspirations lie this season. Maybe it's another playoff finish. I know they were recently there, but they were looking the wrong way down the table last season. And I am going to have to back Weston-super-Mare, which were more on the eyes on the playoffs last season, to win this one by 2-0. On to the Sunday games in the Premier League here. We've got Chelsea versus Palace. The FA Cup holders versus the Conference League holders. Both of these won cups last season. I'll let you discuss yourself which ones is more valuable in the comment section. But 1-1 draw, I think, is going to be the case here between these two London sides. I can't really edge out either. I mean, Crystal Palace won the FA Community Shield the other day, didn't they, on a penalty shootout? So well done for that as well. Really proving why they shouldn't be playing in the Conference League this season and deserve that place in the Europa League on merit alone. Nottingham Forest versus Brentford. I don't want Forest to win this one, so I'm going to go with a Brentford win. 2-0. Simple as. Manchester United versus Arsenal. At one point, this would have been named the best game in English football. At this point, it's one team who's facing down the barrels of relegation and the other team who can't seem to get any higher than second place. So it's one of them ones. I think it's going to be dull. I think it's going to be boring at Old Trafford, a 1-1 draw. Ipswich Town versus Southampton in the Championship. Both of these got relegated last season. Both of them were very poor. Both of them started the season quite well. Southampton to win 2-1. I can't quite pinpoint which one we'll do. But it could really go either way, genuinely. Hull City versus Oxford United. Hull really surprised me about how well they started the season. I really didn't expect them to start the way they did, and I think they've had a better transfer window than I potentially thought they would as well. At the KCOM, I'm still calling it the KCOM. I'm not changing that. I'm going to go with a 2-1 win against Oxford United, who could be in trouble this season. I think they'll be all right in the end because they do have Gary Rowett, but they're not a team which screams quality on paper to me. Leeds United versus Everton. I think we're going to see a fairly even game. This could be a relegation scrap potentially already. 1-1 draw on this one at Ellen Road. AFC Wimbledon versus Cardiff City. I think these are Tuesday night fixtures here. And I know Wimbledon have started the season well, but you look at Cardiff, they're a team which still has some championship quality in it. A narrow 1-0 win for Cardiff City. Huddersfield Town versus Doncaster Rovers in a Yorkshire derby. I've just seen all them comments by Wednesday night. I'll go through absolutely every single one of them at the end of the score predictions. I'll give you that because there's been quite a lot which has been gone through. A 0-0 draw, I think, at the John Smith Stadium here. I think Doncaster have really impressed at the start of this season. Could they get back-to-back promotion? Is it too early to say? It may well be, but it's one of them ones that I think is going to be a shock for us all if they manage to get even into the playoffs. Luton Town versus Wigan Athletic. Luton I back for the title, and I still do. Up against the Wigan side, which I think has been solid so far this season. 1-1 draw. Mansfield Town versus Blackpool. I think at home Mansfield can be all right. I'm just not convinced fully on their away form. But Nigel Clough's men are certainly strong, and I think I've backed them for the playoffs as a bit of a dark horse, or certainly to do very well this season. 2-0 for Mansfield. I'm going to stick with my convictions on this. Northampton Town versus Lincoln City. I'm also going to stick with my convictions of Northampton being dire this season, and I think Lincoln will go to the Sixfield Stadium and win this one by 1-0. Peterborough United versus Barnsley. Barnsley are a team that I doubted Conor Hourihane when he first took over reins. I thought he was one which maybe needed a bit more experience, but seems to be doing all right at the moment. And long may it continue. I think Peterborough will struggle this season as well, so I do think Barnsley will win this one. 3-1 for Barnsley. Plymouth Argyle versus Leyton Orient. We know Plymouth's home can be a fortress. It's another difficult game for Plymouth, who had a very hard start to the season, to be fair, because Leyton Orient finished in the playoffs last season. I do think Plymouth win this one, though. Home advantage at Home Park, 2-0 Argyle. Port Vale versus Stevenage. Again, both of these teams, gotta say, started all right this season. And I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. I can't call it between these two teams at the moment. Rotherham United versus Burton Albion. Burton always let you know they've been in a game, right? They've actually started better than they usually do. And for that reason, I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw in this case. Stockport County versus Bradford City. I think we're going to see another excellent performance by Bradford. I think we're going to see Bradford turn up for the books and be excellent throughout this season, actually. 3-2 to the Bantams. Wycombe Wanderers versus Exeter City. If you didn't see my predictions for League One, do go ahead. I thought that Exeter were going to have a bit of an underwhelming season, maybe involved in a relegation scrap. So for that reason, at Adams Park, I'm going to Wycombe Wanderers to win 2-1. Newport County versus Salford City. Newport, as we've already said, have actually been a bit of a surprise parcel so far. And so, yeah, Newport to win this one at Rodney Parade, 3-1. Accrington Stanley versus Tranmere Rovers. Another surprise package has been Tranmere. But it's a difficult game against Accrington. I think it will be a very end-to-end exhilarating game. 3-3 draw. Bristol Rovers versus Oldham Athletic. I'm going to have to back Bristol Rovers. They were recently in League One. I just think, at home, 1-0 win. I think it will be a very tight game, though. Cheltenham Town versus Bromley. I admire Bromley strongly, and I think Cheltenham are going to struggle this season. So I do think it will be a 1-1 draw, which will be the first point I'm predicting for Cheltenham. But see Bromley continue from strength to strength, really. Colchester United versus Cambridge United. These two teams could either be mid-table or they could be playoffs. I could generally not call it at the moment. And I think they're both about equal on quality. A 1-1 draw. Crawley Town versus MK Dons, the Scott Lindsay derby. Scott Lindsay briefly went away from Crawley after he got them promoted to MK Dons and then has gone now back to Crawley. Crawled back to Crawley, so to speak. And I think Scott Lindsay has got a point to prove. They haven't started well this season, so I think there's going to be a bit of a snap, a 3-0 win for Crawley with a game which basically involves two horrendous looking towns, which are commuter towns of London. Fleetwood Town versus Crewe Alexandra. I think Crewe could just chip away and get points here. I mean, both of these teams, don't get me wrong, have had a phenomenal start to the season. I just think Crewe could be one of those which just get 1-0 here, 1-0 there, 1-0 everywhere, just chipping away, getting random 3 points here and there up against it over time. A 1-0 win for Crewe. Gillingham versus Chesterfield. I do think this will be Chesterfield's first loss. It's at Priestfield. Gillingham tend to be the bogey side, I think, of Chesterfield. So, yeah, 1-0 to Gillingham. Harrogate versus Barrow. This would have been at one point a National League game. It's interesting to see how much these two teams have grown recently. And I do have to say that Barrow, I think, are going to snatch all 3 points. A smash and grab 1-0 win. Swindon Town versus Barnet. I think Barnet are going to put on a 5-star performance, winning a 4 out of... Well, I think they're going to win 4-1. Not 4 out of 1. They're going to win 4-1. Travelling to Swindon Town. Walsall versus Grimsby. It's one of them ones, isn't it? It was Grimsby, I think, which basically caused for wheels to fly off at Walsall last season and start that tumbling down, to which saw them basically bottom of playoffs in the end. And Grimsby, I think, profited a bit from that, and I do think Grimsby can do another good job this season. 3-1 to Grimsby Town. Altrincham versus Hartlepool United. We're really now getting into the start of a National League season, isn't it? That will be the third game, and they're just going to be Saturday, Tuesday, consistently throughout. And this is one of the archetypal sort of National League games now, isn't it? I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. I don't think there's going to be much in it, to be honest. Halifax, I'm going to predict I'm going to need a result. Otherwise, pressure will be on already. Up against a Boston side who looked out of sorts last season. I think they will get 3 points for Shaman here, but a very narrow 1-0 win. Carlisle United versus Solihull Moors. I did say their home ground could be a fortress for Carlisle, but I think Solihull could also make it a bit difficult. A 0-0 draw here. Talking of 0-0 draws, I think I'm going to go with the same with Tamworth versus Truro. Tamworth's main strength is defence, and I think the issue is with Truro is that on their away days, I don't think they're going to be as strong as they are at home. Woking versus Wealdstone. We may see the Ivory Tower Wealdstone and their good start of the season fall here. I'm going to go Woking 1, Wealdstone 0. Alfreton Town versus South Shields. We're going to go with the Sandy Dancers to get a win, a 4-2 win. Alfreton hate playing against South Shields for some reason. They just always have done. South Shields win 4-2. Bedford Town. We're going way ahead if we're going Bedford. Bedford Town versus AFC Telford United. I think you look at this one, and this could be, both of them are recently promoted. I think Telford may be a bit more favourite for it. We go AFC Telford United to win 3-2. A very close game. I'm not going to lie. I think it's going to be one of them ones that end-to-end stuff. Real quality shone throughout. Buxton versus Hereford. Hereford will need the points. They'll need something. 2-1 to Hereford. Chester versus Curzon Ashton. Both of these teams, well, Chester did make the playoffs. Curzon could have made the playoffs. That's actually harder to say than you realise. And I think a 1-1 draw here will not be too surprising. Chorley versus Scarborough. Scarborough, I think, are going to come with an upset here, and they may actually prove to be better away from home than home this season. 2-1 to Scarborough Athletic. Darlington are hosting ASC Fylde, and I think Fylde could have a standout season, right? I think they're going to be absolutely flying by Christmas. 2-1 to Fylde. Another team, though, which could potentially cause a bit of a problem for that perception is Kidderminster Harriers, as they are hosting Oxford City at the Agborough Stadium. I'm going to have to say that Kidderminster Harriers absolutely dominate this one. 4-0 to Harriers. Merthyr Town versus Marine. Both of these teams potentially could struggle on paper this season. A 0-0 draw. Peterborough Sports versus Leamington. Yeah, I think this might be a bit of a mid-table clash. 2-0 Peterborough Sports. That you never know with Peterborough Sports. They could make themselves a playoff contender out of absolutely nowhere and play some blinding football. Radcliffe versus Worksop Town. We could see a very end-to-end game here. I think Radcliffe home advantage, 3-2 winners. I just don't think Worksop are ready for this level. I think both will be relegated though in the end. Southport versus Macclesfield. Macclesfield will be coming with some supreme confidence, I think, in terms of trying to get a result, and I think they will do so. 2-1 to Macclesfield. Spennymoor Town versus Kings Lynn Town. Both of these outside shouts, question mark of the playoffs, maybe actual playoffs with Kings Lynn's case. 2-1 for the Linnets here. Chesham United versus Horsham. Both of these started the season better than I anticipated. And as a result, a 0-0 draw. I think I can't really call it between these two. We could see a very typical Chippenham Town performance as they're hosting Weston-super-Mare, as they look to be a very, again, another mid-table team. A 2-0 win for Chippenham Town, and they'll just keep on pecking along, in a mid-table side. Dagenham and Redbridge versus Tonbridge Angels. 0-0 draw. We'll go here. Again, I think Tonbridge Angels may be a bit of a litmus test for some of these sides who are both coming down and coming up. Dorking Wanderers versus Slough Town. Dorking definitely have an eye on the title. And if you're going to get the title, you need to beat teams like Slough. So 3-1 to Dorking. Eastbourne Borough versus Dover Athletic. A bit of a local derby, so to speak. They're both along the south coast. Only about 50 minutes or so between the two clubs. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one at Priory Lane. I think there will be no bragging rights taken home in this one. Ebbsfleet United versus Chelmsford City. This is an Essex derby. And certainly, I think Builder's quite a good one. I think Ebbsfleet at home could run out as winners in this one, 2-0, and they'll continue their great start to the season. Enfield Town versus Hornchurch, the North London derby that no one talks about on a Tuesday night. Hopefully it's not cold and wet for them too much. I think Hornchurch absolutely going to run out of winners as this one. 2-1 to the Urchins. Maidenhead United versus Hemel Hempstead Town. I think we're finally going to see Maidenhead proved themselves as not just a team who can perform as an underdog and win this one by 4-2. Maidstone United versus Hampton and Richmond Borough. Another one of them interesting ones that I think Maidstone should be winning, and I think they will do, a 2-1 win. Salisbury versus Bath City. I think Bath will be travelling to Salisbury knowing that this could potentially be a lower half of the table, maybe even a relegation scrap at one point. And I think Bath City will come away with 3 points, 2-1. Torquay United versus AFC Towton. Difficult game for Towton, but I think defensively they'll just sit behind the wall at Plainmoor, 0-0 draw. Bolton Wanderers versus Reading. As I've already said, Bolton are incredibly unpredictable at the moment, but Reading have been absolutely shoddy so far, putting it politely. 5-2 to Bolton Wanderers. Notts County versus Shrewsbury Town. I think Notts County may struggle this season. I really do. And I think for that, I'm going to go Shrewsbury to win this one by 3-2. Aldershot Town versus Eastleigh in a Hampshire derby of sorts. I think home advantage in this one. They both may end up being mid-table this season. 2-1 Aldershot Town. Borehamwood versus Braintree Town. I think if Braintree win this, they have certainly had a very good start to the season. But alas, I think it will be a 1-1 draw in this one. Maybe that opening game was just a fluke and will return a bit to normality. But it would still be 3 games on the bounce in the league unbeaten. Certainly no discredit for Braintree there. Forest Green Rovers versus Sutton United. Forest Green, if they're going for the title, need to beat Sutton United here, and they will do, in my view. 2-1. Rochdale versus Gateshead. I don't know where to place my finger on Gateshead, but I know where to place it on Rochdale, and that Rochdale will be in a definite playoff hunt this season, if not a title challenge. 1-0 to Rochdale. Southend versus York City. Gonna go with a 1-apiece draw here. Realistically, I think both of these teams sort of surprise packages last season in terms of York actually doing as well as they did. I certainly did not expect that. Southend to reach the playoff finals when they did, just sneak into the playoffs again, didn't entirely surprise me. Like, think that would happen. You have Yeovil Town versus Brackley Town. Going to go with a 0-0 draw with this one. I think Brackley have proven themselves defensively quite good in the past and won the title last season. Let's not forget. But I think you're looking against Yeovil, maybe a bit of a mid-table clash this one. Farnborough versus Worthing to wrap up the National League, like down from Premier League down to National League North-South. I've got Farnborough hosting Worthing. I'm going to go with a bit of a shock result. Farnborough to win at 1-0. I'm going to have just look through the comments so far, and I will then return to the FA Cup ones. They're all by Wednesday night. It's not a surprise. Good evening to you. Good results for the Owls yesterday. I was there. Great experience. It was a great game. 3-3 draw, as I was talking about. Certainly, that momentum, like, it's just even though it's a penalty shootout win, it's going to be one of them ones that you've got to think it's one of them that they could be strong. So he's given us a bit of a review. It was full-time score, 3-3 draw with a win on penalties, 4-2 for Wednesday. Some ways, a bit of a reset button has been pressed with Wednesday this season, and now we are simply just playing the beautiful game with freedom, passion, and no pressure. It's been fantastic to watch and experience so far, to everyone involved in the stands and probably on the pitch as well. All that drama and disgrace in the background because of Chansiri has arguably took a backseat again to everything else now that it has all started up again in terms of fixtures. The players are clearly giving it all their all, still for the badge, and for us, the fans, all the while, the shows, the protests are still ongoing. Excellent stuff. I can still feel another miracle season of cards for us coming on. It's one form or another. My man of match, Pierce Charles, overall match rating 8 out of 10. Thoughts? Okay, thank you for giving me your assessment on that. It's a lovely, comprehensive overview. And I actually do agree with Wednesday night in terms of that. I think when we were with Derby and we had a bit of a similar situation, we had 21 points deducted from the EFL for administration and financial things. So maybe not as much as the shenanigans that Chansiri has necessarily presented. But for me, it's one of them ones that I do think in terms of it does galvanise the squad. Like you saw it with Southend in the past. You've seen it with all sorts of ones. And the players who are remaining at the club are playing for the badge. You got your likes of Barry Bannon, real servant to the club. You got some youngsters who will be really passionate about it. So yeah, in terms of Wednesday, I do think you'll be relegated, but I think there is a good galvanisation there. Let's go through some FA Cup games, shall we? Atherton Collieries versus Prestwich Hayes we'll start with. One of them Friday night games. One of them ones which could potentially have an upset. You've seen Atherton Collieries over the last few seasons sort of on the regression. They were got relegated from Northern Premier League Premier Division last season. The season before, in 2023-24, finished 15th last season. They're a side that I think really reached their peak, or their recent peak in 2021-22, when you had that really strong standout season where they did well, both in terms of in the Northern Premier League and also in the FA Cup. They're up against a Prestwich Hayes side that are in the league below. They finished 22nd out of 24. You know, they were lucky not to be relegated. They were really much involved in that mire. They've never, the furthest they went was the second qualifying round of the FA Cup. They have been to the FA Amateur Cup quarter final, but in terms of overall history, it's not a huge ringing endorsement for them. So I'm going to go predictably with an upset with a 2-0 win for Prestwich Hayes, which would be an absolute upset, you know, and provided much needed coffers for the club. Lye Town versus Racing Club Warwick. We'll go with that one. Because, again, you got Lye, who got relegated last season, so are now here to cause the upset. They've reached third qualifying round of the FA Cup 3 different occasions. But in terms of overall history, they're really a side that, other than a brief spell in the Northern Premier League Division 1 Midlands, have really just been in the Midland League for most of their time. And they're up against the Racing Club Warwick side, who finished mid-table in the Northern Premier League Division 1 last season. And I think it could be a fairly even game, all things considering. I'm going with a 0-0 draw with Lye Town to win on a replay. So again, another one of them upsets. Epsom and Ewell versus South Park Reigate. Not the South Park TV show. You've got Epsom and Ewell in the league below. They finished 15th out of 20 position in the Combined Counties League Premier Division South last season. It was one of them ones. It was a bit of an underwhelming performance, potentially. Their one standout thing was they did win the Southern Combination Challenge Cup. And they have reached the first round of the FA Cup before, way back when in 1933-34, losing 4-2 to Leyton Orient in that time. But it was certainly a great run in sort of that time. They're hosting South Park Reigate, who finished 15th out of 22 in the Isthmian League South Central Division last season, a mid-table team side for the Tier 8 side. Their furthest they've been is the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 2012-13. I think we could feasibly see a bit of an upset in this one. I'm going to go 4-3 to Epsom and Ewell. I think it will be a fascinating game. Jersey Bulls versus I've just clicked on the wrong tab there. Versus Fisher. And I mean, two quite relatively big clubs, so to speak. You know, it's an early kickoff. You've got Jersey Bulls based on the island of Jersey, and this is the biggest club in there. Founded only in 2018, but have really pulled themselves up. Have had their highest attendance was set towards the end of the last season, where they had 1,862 fans. Like, they have been absolutely immense as a side over the last few years, to be honest. They're a team which are looking really exciting, looking like they're going in a really strong performance and direction. And they're up against the Fisher side, which is a Phoenix club, which was set up in 2009 after Fisher Athletic was wound up. Now, Fisher Athletic, you may remember, if some of you are more older fans potentially, for their time in maybe the Southern League, but they're also in the Football Conference, reaching the first round of the FA Cup, where they, between the years of 1987, 88 and 1990-91 season, they were in the conference, but spent several time in the Isthmian League and the Southern League. They were a team which certainly had pedigree, but in terms of a more recent team, no such success, unfortunately, has been on the cards. So I am going to go with Jersey Bulls to win this one, 2-1. It's just the size of these two clubs is something else. Guisborough Town versus Redcar Athletic. We're going for this one because it's a Teesside derby. They're not too far away from each other, you know. You got Guisborough Town, mid-table Northern League side last season. They did reach the first round of the FA Cup back in 1988-89. So, I mean, they were drawn at home to Bury, and they played at Ayresome Park, home in Middlesbrough, with Bury winning 1-0 in front of 5,990 fans. Huge day out for the lads. And they're up against a Redcar team who got promoted last season, winning the Northern League. And have really been on the up in recent years. It was less than 10 years ago that they were dwelling in regional feeder leagues. And this could be their best ever performance in the FA Cup, you know. So we're going to go 1-1 draw here and Redcar Athletic to win the replay. And I just think Redcar can have their best standout FA Cup performance this season. West Auckland Town versus Bridlington Town. If you don't know the story already, West Auckland Town were a team that somehow got selected to play in the thing called the Sir Thomas Lipton Trophy, which was a sort of competition between the leading football clubs in Europe, with teams from Italy, Germany, and Switzerland all taking involved. But actually, the FA of England refused to nominate a club. So essentially, West Auckland said, we'll go, you know. And there's various myths surrounding about it, including potentially that Arsenal could have been, but when we're known as Woolwich, Arsenal could have been invited. It doesn't matter in a sense, because they actually went to the tournament and beat SC Zurich 2-0 and beat Juventus 6-1. And then, so they've kept that trophy in perpetuity, and there's a whole sort of documentary about it. It's well worth looking at. And they've also reached the first round of the FA Cup on 3 separate occasions, twice going into a replay of that. I mean, so they're certainly a team with huge history and pedigree up against, and they're the underdogs now, up against Bridlington Town, who finished just above relegation zone in the Northern Premier League Division 1 East last season. And they went to the first round of the FA Cup in 1960-61, losing to Bishop Auckland, West Auckland's rival, 3-2, or in 1991-92, where they were defeated 2-1 by York City. But they have won the FA Vase before in 1992-93. They've won the Northern Premier League Premier Division back in 1992-93 as well. So yeah, it was one of them ones that they've had definitely success before, but then they actually were folded towards the end of that time. So yeah, I am going to go Bridlington to win this. I just thought it was worth mentioning a bit about the West Auckland history. 3-1 to Bridlington Town. Northallerton Town versus Kendal Town. Both of these teams are Northern League teams, and a mid-table finish for Northallerton last season. Best they finished in this competition for fourth qualifying round in back-to-back seasons in the 1990s. But I'm more excited in terms of Kendal Town. I've got a friend, a housemate of mine actually, who's from Kendal. They finished just outside the playoffs last season, but they were actually founded as Netherfield. And if that's ringing a bell to you, it's because they were founding members of the Northern Premier League in 1968. And were a team that during most of the time and until the 1980s were a side which were regularly there. And they're actually also were involved in a playoff final in 2008-9 for the place in the Conference North, but lost 4-3 to Ilkeston Town in the semi-finals. And then they finished again in that competition in the playoff finals, but lost 2-1 to Bradford Park Avenue in them semi-finals again. So it's one of them ones that actually, if you turn back the clock, 15 years, you're looking at a really solid team. Now they're not so great. They have also reached the second round of the FA Cup twice. You know, they're a very historic team. I am going to go Kendal Town to win this one, 2-1. A return for the glory days of Kendal is potentially back on. Birtley Town versus Shildon. Birtley are a team which finished lower half, mid-table last season. They had their best FA Cup run last season, reaching the first qualifying round. There's nothing about them which is particularly historic, which in a sense makes them a perfect candidate for maybe having a bit of an upset against the Shildon side, which finished as runners-up in the Northern League last season. Couldn't manage to win the playoffs. Have reached the second round of the FA Cup back in 1936-37. Have reached the quarterfinals of the FA Amateur Cup, reached the semi-finals of the FA Vars. Were recently involved within a Northern Premier League season. I'm going to go with an upset here for Birtley. I think Birtley will win 4-3. A really exciting game. Thornaby versus Dunstan UTS. Thornaby absolutely demolished them last game, 6-0 by the way. I saw that, and this team was actually in the news recently for removing the a load of the basically entire female section of the club from under sevens to the women's team. They have reached the third round, by the way, of the FA Cup when they were known as Stockton. I'm not counting that as the same club. So the third have actually done is the third qualifying round, okay? But they have reached the semi-finals of the FA Amateur Cup. But yeah, in terms of this sort of removing the entire women's team, essentially brought national news to it. And you had people who had all sorts of positions on it. You had Andy McDonald, the nearby local MP. Beth Mead brought it out. It forced the entire board to resign. And they're going in as now the underdog against Dunstan UTS, which I have seen play before. I quite like their ground. Quite like their fans as well. They've won the FA Vars recently in 2012. Have twice reached the fourth qualifying round of this competition. They finished as runners-up in the Northern Premier League Division 1 East last season. Didn't succeed in the playoffs. They were really good, though. I am going to have to back Dunstan, but I think it'll be a competitive 3-2 win. These two teams, by the way, haven't played each other in 20 years. Like, that's how far back you have to go before these two teams played each other. Earlham versus Chadderton. We'll go with that one. Earlham finished 7th last season in the North West County League. Nothing particularly notable about them, really. They haven't done much within their history, to be honest. They've only... they have spent the last almost 10... this will be their 9th season in the North West County League Premier Division. but they're certainly a team which hasn't got history. Chadderton finished one place above them. So these are actually two very evenly placed teams. So I think it could be a very even game on this one. We're going to go with a 1-0 win for Chadderton away from home. Wombwell Town versus Parkgate. Two of these teams which are very much mining communities historically in South Yorkshire. I'm choosing this one with Wombwell Town. Essentially, this is their best ever FA Cup performance because they were founded in 2018. They're a new team. This is the first time they've actually entered the FA Cup. They got promoted from the Northern Counties East Division 1 last season. They started off in Tier 12. Sorry, not Tier 12, Tier 13. Had to deal with a couple of COVID years and have really sprung themselves up the pyramid on a great sort of rise. It's because they're founded by former Barnsley players Carl Rose and Doug O'Connor, who both played for Barnsley in the past. So I'll be interested to see where their ceiling actually is, because they are taking on a Parkgate side who finished very much mid-table last season in 11th. Haven't done much in the FA Cup before the first, they reached the second qualifying round. But also were a side that they've been like a perennial team in the Northern Counties one. And so it could be an interesting one. I am going to have to say, unfortunately, Wombwell's spell will come to an end. I think Parkgate will win this one 2-0. But I am saying it now. If Wombwell do win this one, absolutely huge for that club. And they'll really be going places. West Didsbury and Chorlton versus Brighouse Town. I mean, I saw West Didsbury last season in the FA Vars, but they are now underdogs firmly against Brighouse Town. Their manager's Paul Marshall, who was a friend of during the academy years of Micah Richards. They've reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 2022-23. They are a team who have recently really been going places. They've got a very interesting home kit. If you've not seen it, do give it a Google, because that is an absolutely fascinating home kit. They're up against a Brighouse Town team, which were almost relegated last season. I think the only reason they weren't was potentially reprieve because of Farsley Celtic and their demise. And yeah, I just think you look at it. This could possibly have all the makings of an upset. I am going to go with Brughouse to win this one 3-0. I've probably just wasted everyone's time there. Wythenshawe versus Vauxhall Motors. We'll go with that one, because Wythenshawe were in the Northern Premier League Division 1 West last season, but were relegated. This is their second best time in the FA Cup and they're in the preliminary round, right? So this, if they get through this will be their best ever FA Cup performance. Just hear that out, you know. Like, it's one of them ones with the Wythenshawe team that they haven't really done a lot. They're owned by a person called Sacha Lord, who is the co-creator of the Parklife Festival. If you are interested in any of the sort of Britpop music, that might interest you. And they're hosting Vauxhall Motors, who finished 5th in the playoffs last season. And they're one of them ones which you'd certainly assume that Vauxhall Motors progress here. They've reached the second round proper of the FA Cup back in 2002-03. They've been in the Conference North before. Huge team, relatively speaking. You know, they've been one of them ones which have had a huge history. So yeah, I am going to go with the fallen giants of Vauxhall Motors to win this one here 2-0. Stalybridge Celtic versus Bury. I would be a naive fool not to mention Bury, who obviously won this competition not once but twice back in the early 1900s. And you're looking at it, and they're certainly a team that you're coming into this as well. This would have actually maybe been at one point a league tie, because Stalybridge Celtic were actually in the Football League 3rd Division North. Do not forget that they were averaging almost 2,000 fans more than Rochdale at that time. I mean, they had 5,480 fans on average in 1922. They are a team which, in them days, were huge. They've almost reached the Conference National in playoffs of a Conference North. Like, these are two really giants of a football history to be playing each other this early on in the competition. I am going to back Bury to win this one by 2-0, which may be a bit of an upset. Maybe not. Bury will have an eye on returning to the Football League one day. It may be one of them things that just doesn't happen. That is the thing. You do look at the likes of Hereford and Chester, and they're stuck in the National League North. But we're not going to dwell too much on that. We're instead going to go on to SC St Helens versus Atherton Laburnum Rovers. SC St Helens performed what for me was quite a big upset in terms of knocking out former Football League Division 1 side Glossop North End. And now they only were in Step 5 back in 2023-24 in the North West Counties League Division 1 North, I want to say. I mean, they're a team which plays in a very much more rugby located thing. They only were founded in 2014, a very new team. This is their best season in the FA Cup already. And they're at home to Atherton Laburnum Rovers, who got promoted last season from the North West Counties Division 1 North. I mean, they reached the third qualifying round of the FA Cup before and have a bit more pedigree. They've been in the Northern Premier League before. They've been in the semi-finals of the FA Vars. So yeah, it's one of them ones that they spent three seasons in the Northern Premier League Division 1. And I think they're going to see another former fallen giant fall to the St Helens might, and they're going to win 3-2 to FC St Helens. Silverstone versus Ramsbottom United. I had a good laugh at the Ramsbottom United one when I saw it, but I have composed myself for you. And they are going to be coming in as the upsets, because Silverstone did win at the Northern Counties East League last season to make it to the Northern Premier League the season. I don't know if it's the first time in history or not, but it's certainly where they are now. Ramsbottom finished 3rd in the North West Counties League. It's a very even game, right? Both of these are, I mean, recently Ramsbottom were in the Northern Premier League Premier Division. Were they in a Premier Division? No, we're certainly in Division 1. Maybe it was just Division 1. But I mean, they did win the Premier League, Northern Premier League Division 1 North playoffs in 2013-14. So maybe we're at one point. So yeah, they're an interesting one, I think. And I think Silverstone will win this one at home 2-0. But it could. Both of these ones, I think, are about equal on paper, actually. So it could be an exciting game. Congleton Town versus Padiham. Congleton are in the league above. They were finished 3rd in the Northern Premier League Division 1 West last season. A really strong team. They've been somebody who have... what's notable about the club? They reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1989-90. They've reached the semi-finals of the FA Vars a couple of seasons back in 2022-23. Reached the 4th round of the FA Trophy in 2000-2001. Bit of a roller coaster of a club, to be honest. They're someone who've been all over the place in recent history. And so it'll be absolutely fascinating to see how they cope up against Padiham, who finished 4th. So a very strong season in North West Counties League last season. This could well be an upset. I mean, let's go back to the 1880, shall we, to 1883-84 FA Cup, where the shock, I think, to think about it now, it may not be a shock then. They reached the 3rd round of the FA Cup. I never managed a record they'll ever managed to break, but we'll see if they'll do it on this one. And I think it will be an upset with Padiham winning 2-1. Longridge Town versus Emley. We look at Longridge Town on their side, which won a relegation scrap last season. So this would definitely be an upset if they managed to pull this off. They've only recently established themselves in the Northwest Counties League Premier Division, and they're up against an Emley side which finished in the playoffs last season in the Northern Premier League Division 1 East. At one point, I thought they were maybe going to be involved in the title. They lost in playoffs instead against Dunstan. And yeah, they're a side who've definitely been on the rise recently. They were only in the Northern Counties East League Premier Division in 2020-21, and that's the highest they've ever been, and that's one of them ones which huge. So they're a club on the ascendancy, and I do think Emley win this one 4-1. Belper Town versus Kidsgrove Athletic. Why would I not mention my beloved Derbyshire teams? I'll mention a few of them. Belper Town, for example, who I have been dubbed the Northern Department of by the fans. It's a real shame in one sense that I'm not going to be able to see them this season because they've been transferred to the Midland Division after having done so well and finishing the playoffs last season. It just wasn't quite enough. They went to the 1st round of the FA Cup in 1887-88. I've never reached it since. They lost 3-2 to the Wednesday, as it was then, now Sheffield Wednesday. If I would like Belper to have a really good FA Cup run for me this season, because potentially I want to see them up here. I'd like to see them in an FA Cup game. And they're up against a Kidsgrove Athletic side that were almost relegated from Northern Premier League Division 1 West last season. The furthest they've reached is the 4th qualifying round twice of the FA Cup. They've reached the FA Vars semi-final. Not the semi-Vars, what am I talking about? So yeah, I think this could be an interesting one because two clubs looking different ways. I do think Belper will win this one 2-1. Malvern Town versus Worcester Raiders. This will be an upset if Worcester Raiders pull this off because Malvern Town, they managed to reach the playoffs last season in the Southern League Division 1 South, losing 1-0 in the final to Evesham United. They've not done as well in the FA Cup historically, reaching the furthest they've reached in the 3rd qualifying round twice during the 1980s. So yeah, if an upset is on, it's certainly one here. With Malvern have never been a team which have particularly taken this competition overly seriously. They're up against a Worcester Raiders team, only formed in 2001, have swapped grounds with Worcester City because they're now playing at Claines Lane, and Worcester City are now playing at the Sixthway Stadium. So it is one of them interesting ones, so to speak. The furthest they reach of the 1st qualifying round, so if they manage to get through this, they will equal their best. I think it'll be a 3-3 draw and Worcester Raiders to win the replay at home. I think big shock potentially on that one. Bedworth United versus Atherstone Town. You can't overlook the North Warwickshire derby, can you? And Bedworth will definitely be favourites for this one in the league above. Although we're involved with a relegation scrap last season, but haven't ever actually made it 1st round in the FA Cup. They've been to, but they've tried several times. They knocked out in the 4th qualifying round on 5 separate occasions. So you can't fault them for lack of effort. You certainly can say that. They've been sort of a regular team around Tier 8 for a fair few years now, I suppose. So they should know what it takes to beat an Atherstone Town team, shouldn't they? Who finished 3rd in the Midland League Premier Division last season. and were then transferred over. And they're a side who have actually been in the Southern League Premier Division before during the 1970s and then during basically the entirety of the 90s. And since then have been a club in regression, really. They've reached the second round of the FA Cup back in 1990-91. They twice reached the semi-finals of the FA Amateur Cup and have reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vase on 3 separate occasions. They love a good cup run, this team, and for that reason, I'm going for Atherstone Town to win 3-1. Pershore Town versus Coleshill Town. If Coleshill can knock out Nuneaton Town, now, okay, yeah, Nuneaton would have technically been the upset, but, circumstances. I think they have a good chance of doing well here. Pershore, though, will be looking for an upset at home. The Plums, as they are nicknamed, known for their famous plums, Pershore. Could do with a plum now, something just to close my mouth. That's why their away colours are plum purple. They've been a side that I think haven't overly done much in terms of history. The first stage of the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1993-94, which was shown on the BBC, mind you, that 3-1 loss at home to Yeading. They are taking on Coleshill Town, though, who 9th in the Northern Premier League Division 1 Midlands last season, but reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2016-17. Again, I think Coleshill can actually do a good run this season. And so I'm going to back Coleshill to win 2-1. Let's go with another Derbyshire team and another team that I've seen this time at home. I've seen teams play is Long Eaton United. Yay! I really like that home ground actually. I saw them in midweek, so it was a bit of a quiet one altogether. They're up against Hinckley, and so Hinckley are looking to cause an upset. They were sort of very average last season. I mean, they until fairly recently been in Tier 10 though, so you can't blame them too much for a mid-table season last year out. So yeah, it's one of them ones that Hinckley will be coming in here, hosting it, looking for an upset for Long Eaton. The likes of Jamie Hanson, if you're a Derby fan, you may remember him. He's on the books of the club at the moment. They reached the playoff last season. Haven't really done as well in the FA Cup as I expect. They've reached the 3rd qualifying round on 5 different occasions, but haven't really managed to get beyond that. They reached quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2020-21. I think this could be an interesting one. I am going to go and back my Derbyshire roots here. 3-1 to Long Eaton United. Sutton Coldfield Town versus Newcastle Town. We'll go with this one. It's still really hot in here, crikey. It's one of them ones that is there going to be an upset in this one? Sutton Coldfield Town was mid-table last season. They have reached the first round of the FA Cup on 2 different occasions. They're a team which actually have quite a large area, despite they have 105,000 people in Sutton Coldfield, right? But most of the teams, like places which have that many in population, have a full-time team, which is at least nationally, if not football league. So they are perennial underachievers, so to speak. And they're up against a Newcastle Town team that was definitely lower half mid-table last season. They reached the 1st round of the FA Cup in 1996 and 97. They also reached the FA Vase semi-finals before in 1999-2000. It's going to be one of them ones, isn't it? It could really go either way. I'm going to go 3-1 Sutton Coldfield Town home advantage. We'll go with a Derbyshire derby, Michelota versus Matlock Town. I don't know how to choose between these two. I've been to Michelota before. They really disappointed me when I went and watched them both home and away. It was a freezing cold day. I went to Station Road, snow on the pitch, tannoy blasting, saying, "Watch it, like don't run around the edge of the pitch." Got one of my, I left the pint glass downstairs. I filled it with water earlier, and they're hosting for a team which I've seen away in Matlock Town, which I thought were great fun away fans. I mean, it's where I have my profile picture, like my screen lock, is me holding a Derbyshire flag with them. Gave me stickers to stick on the back of my laptop, which then actually my laptop then broke completely, so that was unfortunate. So I don't know who to pick in this one. They were both quite poor last season, actually. I'm gonna go Take Me Home, Station Road, home advantage. Mickleham was far, but in a way, my closest club last, like when I lived in Derby. 2-0 to the Sports. We'll go Basford United versus Hucknall Town. We'll go with a Nottinghamshire derby instead for this one. Because some of you may remember some of these two teams. You know, they have Basford are a team which will be looking to make sure they don't have an upset against them, because they got relegated from Northern Premier League Premier Division last season, spending a lot of their time at that sort of Southern League Premier Division, Northern Premier League Premier Division, sort of flipping between the two. Furthest reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 2022-23. Reached the fourth round of the FA Trophy last season, by the way. They're a team which were, again, disappointing last season fundamentally. And they're up against a Hucknall Town team, which you may remember from their days being in the Football Conference North, that is. And they spent a few seasons there. They had a new ground, which basically bankrupted the club and meant that they had to start again at Tier 10. All very embarrassing, really. And they're now finally on the men's, so to speak. They've been runners-up in the FA Trophy before in 2004-05. Like, historically, two very solid Nottinghamshire teams, which have had a bit of down on their luck over recent years. Hucknall Town to win this one, and that will be an upset, 2-0. On to the next one. I'm going Newark and Sherwood United. Newark. That's what all that fan base ever did. Up against Boston Town. I'm choosing this one because I've seen Newark and Sherwood before. They're a team that have the most annoying fan base. But they're a team that they won the Not Senior Cup a couple of seasons back, that haven't ever really been that much of a team that have had much of a history, to be honest. So this could really be the making of them. A good cup run this season. Up against a Boston Town team that, in terms of the FA Cup, they reached the first round in 1976-77. They've been, they're a team that, again, haven't really been that great in the past, mainly Tier 19. But I am going to back Boston Town to win this one, 2-1. Quite an even game. Skegness Town versus Lincoln United. A Lincolnshire derby. A coastal town, which is heavily commercialised, versus a tourist honey spot. Or honeypot, I can't remember what they call it, but in terms of attracts a lot of people in Lincoln. Lincoln would be looking to avoid an upset here, getting promoted last season and actually having been in the Northern Premier League a lot of their time in their history. I think it will be a 0-0 draw with Lincoln United to win a replay. Gorleston versus Walsham the Willows. Of course, I'm going to go with my Godfather's team. And Gorleston are in the league above, finished 8th. You'd highly suspect them to do it. They've reached the first round of the FA Cup. Admittedly, it was twice. Both of them came in the 1950s, so a fair time whack ago now. One of them was against Leyton Orient. But they've sort of been in they've been rebuilding. They've sort of managed to get themselves into the Isthmian League now and establish themselves there. Walsham and the Willows, on the other hand, are a side that reached the playoffs of the Eastern Counties League last season, but if they get past this round, this will be their best ever performance in the FA Cup. They've fallen out of the preliminary round on 6 different occasions. They have a very much a hoodoo at this stage of a competition, and they'll be wanting to put that firmly to bed. I think it's going to be another disappointing season, unfortunately. Gorleston to win this one 4-1. Histon versus Woodbridge Town. Histon are another team which has been in the Conference North before, I believe. Conference South, rather. I know it was one of them. Just proves how much it's moved further south. They've actually been in a Conference National. What am I talking about, Biff? Been in a Conference National in 2008-9, where they went and beat Leeds United in the second round as well in that season of the FA Cup to go to the third round where they lost against Swansea City. Qualified for the playoffs of the conference that season, by the way, losing 2-1 in aggregate to Torquay United. Actually, that is such a high point. This team is a real fallen giant who have now been in Tier 9 and have been absolutely tumbling ever since. And they're up against a Woodbridge Town side that, they're a team which no one really has heard of much of in the past. Their best performance in the FA Cup came in third qualifying. They did reach the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 1998-99, just for the new millennium. But again, haven't done much successfully. So, an exciting game altogether. 5-4. Newmarket Town versus Felixstowe and Walton United. Newmarket, more known for its horses, of course. And that famous quote by, actually, no, it wasn't. That was about Ascot, wasn't it? But in terms of, it's a definite horse racing town. And they've only recently been promoted to the Isthmian League North Division and just stayed up last season. The best FA Cup performance was in 4 qualifying round in 1992-93. They're up against Felixstowe and Walton United, formed in, or 2 clubs rather, which merged in the year 2000, living it up in the year 2000, finishing as runners-up last season and still not managing to make the playoffs, having been involved in the playoffs several times over recent seasons. They've been in the third qualifying round, the best time in the FA Cup in 2016-17. They're a team that on paper should be winning this one, and I think they will. 4-0. Mildenhall Town versus Wroxham. Mildenhall are in Isthmian League North Division. They were in lower mid-table last season. They've literally had hardly anything in their history of marked success. They have a couple of times been in the Isthmian League Division 1 North where they currently are. But at the same time, they're up against a Wroxham side who were arguably worse than them last season. Well involved with a sort of thick of a relegation battle. They reached the FA Vase final in 2009-10. They really haven't, neither of these times have actually, they're both teams that are on a bit of a rise at the moment. I'm going 2-1 Wroxham. Ely City versus Haverhill Rovers. Both of these teams are in Tier 9. Why on earth have Ely City named their club, their home ground rather, the Unwin Ground? That is the most stupid name ground I've ever come across. They reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1956-57. They're a team that I would have said should maybe have performed a bit higher than they ever have done. And I certainly expect them to be. They reached the playoffs last season of the Eastern Counties League. Fully expect them to go at it again. They're up against Haverhill Rovers, who were promoted from Eastern Counties Division 1 North last season. They reached the 4th qualifying round in 2006-7, quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 1986-87. Again, a team which has been a bit of a yo-yo team of late. 2-1 to Ely City in this one. Lowestoft Town versus St Neots Town. Both of these teams in Tier 8. It was Lowestoft Town, which got relegated last season from the Southern League Premier Division Central. But they and they have been in the Conference North before. Have also been in the final of the FA Vase before, reached the first round of the FA Cup on 6 different occasions. Certainly got pedigree up against the St Neots Town, which got promoted last season from the United Counties League. So they're now actually at the same level, but 2 clubs go in different directions. To be fair, they did reach the first round of the FA Cup in 1966-67. But I'm going to go with a bit of a shock and the market with the ascendancy. 2-1 St Neots Town. Welwyn Garden City versus Waltham Abbey. Again, 2 Tier 8 teams here. Welwyn Garden City are a team which really haven't done much within their history. Furthest they've reached in this competition with the 3rd qualifying round replay. And I reckon this season could potentially mark a change to that if they get past this game, which I don't actually think they will do. They're up against the Waltham Abbey side, who finished in the playoffs last season in the Isthmian League North. They have also only reached the 3rd qualifying round of the FA Cup. Either of these sides, if they win this, I think there is a potential. Now, obviously, it's a questionable one, but there's a potential for them to break a bit of records for the club, you know. So Waltham Abbey 4, Welwyn Garden City 1. We'll go to Cockfosters versus Little Oakley, because looking at this, you've got one side which is a bit more established than the other. You've got Cockfosters who, they finished 3rd last season in the Spartan South Midlands League, only to fail in the playoffs. If they get through this game, this will equal their best FA Cup performance, because the first they reached was the 1st qualifying round, all during the 2010s period. They're up against a Little Oakley side, which have got virtually no history in this competition. Generally, they've hardly got any history at all, mainly being in the village leagues, as it used to be called. 2-1 to Cockfosters. But Little Oakley, if they do well in this, I think it'd be a huge advancement for the club. On to Takeley versus Bowers and Pitsea. We're about halfway through these FA Cup ones. I might need to go and get my charger, because for some reason I left it at home, which was very stupid of me. Downstairs, rather. Takeley are a team that were promoted via the playoffs last season to the Isthmian League North Division. I don't think they've ever been this high before. If they manage to win this game, this will be the best they've ever done in the FA Cup. They're a team that not a lot of people would have heard of potentially before this game, and they're up against a Bowers and Pitsea side, which got relegated from Isthmian League Premier Division last season. Notably, if everyone remembers, reached the 1st round of the FA Cup in 2021-22. Reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2015-16. Certainly on paper, well and truly the favourites for this one. And I am going to have to back them. 5-1 to Bowers and Pitsea. Milton Keynes Irish versus Arlesey Town. That's going to be an interesting one. I think I'm going to have to back the favourites for Milton Keynes Irish on their ascendancy at the moment, which only a few seasons ago were in the Division 1 of the Spartan South Midlands League. And if they'll equal their best FA Cup performance if they manage to get through this round. And they're hosting Arlesey Town, which is a team which is plays at New Land Ground, just missed out on the playoffs last season, won the FA Vase in 1994-95, and have twice reached the first round of the FA Cup in 2011-12 and 2012-13, which was really where their peak was, where they were they were in the Premier Division of the Southern League as well. So really a team which have dropped off, and I'm going to 5-2 to MK Irish. Harlow Town versus Woodford Town. This is one which will be a turn up for both, because Harlow at one point were in 1966 actually played Uruguay in a friendly match for preparation of the FIFA World Cup. They also I think played against Benfica in a friendly as well. So they've had a few like weird friendlies, and they've also been in the Southern League before, and then withdrew and went down a couple of leagues. Like they've been like in the Isthmian League, like Premier Division. Like overall, they reached the fourth round of the FA Cup, by the way, in 1979-80. Let's just go through some of that magic which they had during that season, shall we? Because what season that was, right? They entered in the first round proper. Did they? No, they basically got through a ton of rounds. I'm going to try and see who they were knocked, like who they were in. There you are. They entered in the preliminary round, by the way, beating Lowestoft Town, Hornchurch, Bury Town, Harwich and Parkeston, Margate to reach the first round proper for the first time. They defeated Leytonstone and Ilford 2-1. Then they drew 1-0 all away to Southend United before winning the replay 1-0 in front of 5,000 spectators. They were then drawn away to second division leaders at Leicester City, drew 1-1 at Filbert Street, won the replay at home 1-0, watched by 9,723 people, and then they lost away 4-3 to Watford. What an incredible story. And they're up against a Woodford Town team, which is one of them ones that, like, they reached the playoffs last season of the FA Cup. If they reach the first qualifying round this season, that will be their third equal best time getting to this thing. I mean, ultimately, they haven't done much in their history. They've only been around since 2002, you know. So 2-1 to Harlow, a bit of a heartbreaker, but I think the FA Cup pedigree speaks for itself. Ware versus Ilford. Ware is definitely favourites to win this one, having been upper mid-table in Southern League last season, and been in the first round proper of the FA Cup twice in 1968-69 and 2007-8. And they are up against Ilford, which finished lower mid-table in the Essex Senior League last season. I've reached the second round of the FA Cup though 3 times in 1925-26, 1927-28, and 1974-75. So certainly have history in it. I'm going with a 1-1 draw, but I am going to go with Ware to win the replay. Let's go Hitchin Town versus Grays Athletic next. And Hitchin, if you know your football, they were relegated last season from Southern League Premier Division Central, but they were one of the earliest admissions into the FA Cup, where they the name of Hitchin, reaching the second round in 1871-72 in the first ever FA Cup. It may have been a different club, we're not too sure, but they have also reached the FA Cup second round on several other occasions in 1973-74, 1976-77, 1994-95, and 1995-96, and also reached the FA Amateur Cup semi-finals before as well. So certainly one of them ones which historically a very famous club, and Hitchin is a well-known player at this competition. Grays Athletic, meanwhile, are a team which have played in the Conference National between the years 2005-06 and 2009-10. They are a team which have been in a bit in decline and sort of just hit their level in the Isthmian League division, in the North Division for last almost they were relegated from Premier Division 2016-17. They reached the second round of the FA Cup in 2005-06. It's a really hard one to say. I'm going to go Hitchin Town at Topfield to win this one 1-0. Fairford Town versus Roman Glass St George. How many are we gonna do tonight? I'm not we'll see. Fairford, they're just sort of an average team in Hellenic League. Best they've ever done is the first qualifying round, and that if they get through, that will equal that'll be their sixth time to be there. So there's certainly one of them ones which they've not done that well in this competition. Historically, and they're up against a Roman Glass St. George team, which is very different in terms of they have reached, well, depends whether you count it as the same club, which, well, they reached, they've not done well in the FA Cup themselves. Like, if they'll equal their best performance if they did that. So, overall, this could potentially be the best season for either of these two clubs. 1-0 Roman Class St. George, I'll go with. Halen versus Bishop's Cleeve. I'm going to go with next because Halen got promoted last season from the Western League Division 1. They're generally a club which they reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 2004-05, but have recently spent a lot of time in Tier 10, struggling to get out of it. And they're obviously up against a Bishop's Cleeve side, which finished in the playoffs last season in the Southern League Division 1 South. Like, you got to say, on paper, having lost in extra time in the semi-finals of that playoffs, they're definitely the team on paper you would anticipate to win. And I'm going to have to go with it. 3-1 Bishop's Cleeve. Risborough Rangers versus Virginia Water. Risborough Rangers were poor last season. They were almost relegated to the 10th tier, so wouldn't have been in this competition. You got to think in terms of that. It's one of them ones that they've never been a great team, but it'll be absolutely, I think it may be even the best FA Cup run. Oh no, they reached the second qualifying round in 2020-21, but they could equal it if they managed to get past, cause an upset. It would be an upset against Virginia Water, who admittedly finished mid-table last season. And if Virginia Water do this season, this will be their second season in the first qualifying round, but they're also equal their best performance. So it's an interesting one. I am going to go Risborough Rangers to win this one 2-1, which would be an upset. Mangotsfield United versus the Cribs. It's one of them ones that we saw Mangotsfield United looking really good last season, reaching the playoff. It was definitely in the playoffs last season anyway, in the Hellenic League. They've reached the semi-finals of the FA Vars before, reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup on 3 separate occasions. So certainly have got the momentum behind them compared to Cribs, who got relegated last season from the Southern League Division 1. Who are a team which have never really been a huge admirer in terms of they're literally a shopping centre, right? So I am going to have to say Cribs will win this one 2-0. Marlow versus Binfield. I'm selecting this one because, well, you'll see why in a minute due to the scoreline, but also due to the fact that Marlow were a team that reached the semi-finals of the FA Cup in 18, 81, 82. They have twice reached the semi-finals of the FA Amateur Cup. They are certainly a team that in the early days of the FA Cup were one of the best teams out there. And we're now in Tier 8, that is a fallen giant, whatever way you dice it. Binfield almost got relegated from the Isthmian League last season. They've only ever reached the third qualifying round of the FA Cup. It really tells you a lot. They were runners-up of the FA Vars in 2020-21, but I'm going to go 8-1 to Marlow. Flackwell Heath versus Tuffley Rovers. We're going to go with a 6-0 for Flackwell Heath, which is unsurprising considering they did finish in the playoffs last season and have been a club which have fundamentally been going in the right direction over the recent years. That's fair to say, I think. They're up against a Tuffley Rovers side who, in all reality, mid-table last season. They have really never been that good in the FA Cup. The best was in the second qualifying round. So, 6-0 Flackwell Heath. Ardley United versus Burnham. Another one of them cases, I think, which you've got one side which is desperately mid-table, haven't the furthest reached the second qualifying round of the FA Cup. They've just hardly done much in their time compared to a Burnham side, which were just outside the playoffs last season in the Southern League Premier Division at one point. Have been in the first round of the FA Cup in 2005-06, reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 1982-83. So certainly historically Burnham a bigger club, but I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. I am going to go with Burnham to win the replay. I don't think we've got too many left. Leatherhead versus Westfield. I am also, though, very conscious I'm only on 10%. So I'm going to actually rattle through these, try and do as quickly as possible. Leatherhead were a team which have been in the final of the FA Trophy before, the semi-final twice of the FA Amateur Cup, reached the fourth round of the FA Cup in the 1970s. Everybody knows the pedigree that Leatherhead have attached with them. Like, they are a team that in this competition, right, they have absolute pedigree. It just screams it, to manage to reach the fourth round of the FA Cup. And during that time, they beat in the proper competition Bishop Stortford, then Colchester United, Brighton Hove Albion, managed by Peter Taylor, and then they got knocked out at home to First Division Leicester City. It remains one of the best runs, I think, in terms of football. It was, they basically were ahead at one point, and then they lost 3-2. In this game, I think Westfield will win 2-1, and that will be an upset. So yeah, we'll go another upset in that one, because the best they've ever reached in the FA Cup is the second qualifying round. We'll go VCD Athletic versus Sittingbourne. VCD were promoted from the Southern Counties League via the playoffs last season. I'm going to go and get my charger super quick. I'm hoping it doesn't die. I'm really hoping it doesn't die. I usually plug it in before the start of the stream. So, and that's the reason why. Because I don't want to go rushing off to go and get a charger. Right, back into it. VCD Athletic. That's where we're at. Yeah, they've not really had much. The first they reached the second qualifying round of the FA Cup. They have been with Isthmian Premier Division before, so that at least counts towards something. But yeah, we're promoted last season from the Southern Counties East. They're up against Sittingbourne, who were runners up in the Eastern League South East Division, so like a whole league between them last season. And they've certainly been a big team in the past. Reaching quarterfinals of the FA Trophy before, last season actually in 24-25. They've been in the second round twice of the FA Cup in 1925-26 and 1928-29. Been in the Southern League Premier Division before. So yeah, 2-0 Sittingbourne, I think. But we could feasibly see an upset fight VCD. Hayes and Yeading United versus Sutton Common Rovers. Hayes and Yeading are a side that some of you may remember from the time when they were in the Conference National. They played in Conference South in 2007-8 and then got promoted in via the playoffs in 2008-9. And this meant that they got to the Conference National. And they were actually all right, to be fair. They were 17th of their first season, and it was really quite successful at one point in time. You had like Gareth Ainsworth was unable to, like, they beat a team of Wycombe Wanderers of League One in the FA Cup, which had Gareth Ainsworth as Gareth Ainsworth won the game 2-1 for Wycombe Wanderers when they played him against them. That's why. Okay, flipping out. It was hard enough to read that. I've been doing this for way too long, and I'm blabbering. But they were in the Conference National for ages? Like, it was, for at least a solid 5 years or so. Like, they've dropped off massively to be in the Tier 8 now, right? And they're up against the Sutton Common Rovers team that, let's face it, they haven't got much history surrounding them, right? They were relegated last season from the Isthmian League South Central. They have never gotten further than the second qualifying round. They're a team which spent a few seasons in the Isthmian League South Central, but that's the sort of highest they've been. And I think this is going to be a closer game than the two history suggests. I'm going with Hayes and Yeading only to win by 1-0. Let's go Bedfont Sports versus Kingstonian. Kingstonian reached... We'll go to Kingstonian, actually. We'll start with Bedfont Sports, as we have been doing. They won promotion from Combined Counties League Iver playoffs last season, in the North Division of that. Reached the 4 qualifying round of the FA Cup in 2021-22. Really, they don't have much of a history. They were at one point a Sunday League team, and then only became a Saturday League team in 2002. But let's go to Kingstonian, who reached the playoffs of the Isthmian League South Central last season. They don't have a home ground, and the reason why, you may remember this in the news, they did play at a home ground that was theirs called Kings Meadow, and they essentially originally ground shared with Chelsea Women, and then Chelsea bought it out essentially, and then proceeded to evict Kingstonian, which was one of the most disgraceful things that ended up happening. I think, it was just a whole sort of bad thing which happened. I mean, they were in the conference at one point, right? They were a huge team, right? They played in the conference in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. They weren't a small team, They've won 2 FA trophies. They've won an FA Amateur Cup. They've been to the 4th round of the FA Cup in 2000, 2001. Huge team historically. To now be in Tier 8 is something spectacular. And I think they're going to be knocked out by Bedfont Sports by 3-2. So what a turn up and an upset for the Bucks there. Ashford United versus Holmesdale. So I thought I smelled burning. I was like, please don't say my laptop's about to puff up in smoke. Ashford United team equally historical in a lot of ways, having spent a lot of time in the Southern League. I think even in the top flight of the Southern League at one point. and sort of one of them teams that have been in the second round of the FA Cup on 3 different occasions in 1960, 61, 1966, 67, and 1996, 97. Reached the semi-final of the FA Trophy in 1972-73, and the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2015-16. They're a solid team historically, mid-table in the Isthmian League South East last season. They're up against a Holmesdale side who are coming in as an upset here, who've never gone further than the preliminary round of the FA Cup. The best performance of the FA Vase was the fourth round. They're generally a team that have got nothing to lose in an extent. Like, this would be huge for the club to manage to win this one. I do think Ashford United will win this one 2-1, but could be an upset on that one. Merstham versus Faversham Town. Merstham finished in the playoffs last season at Isthmian League South East. They've reached the first round of the FA Cup in 2016-17, quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2008. They were a team that I could have sworn that they were in the at one point in the Isthmian League. Yeah, like Premier League. They were, and they finished in the playoffs at one point, losing in the final in 2018-19. Like, they're another one which I remember, like, when I first started, like, carefully paying attention to football, they were a side which I thought were maybe a team which would in the future reach the National League, but we just didn't. Faversham Town, however, are a team which had basically stolen England's logo, got promoted from the Southern Counties East last season. Best they've done in the FA Cup third qualifying round. They've generally been a team that haven't had too much success in the past. So if they can form an upset here, which I think they will, I think Faversham will win this one 2-0. I'm going to go with a cheeky upset. Tooting and Mitcham United versus AFC Croydon Athletic. Tooting and Mitcham are here for the upset at home. They finished just short of the playoffs last season by quite a margin, actually. Quarter-finals lists of the FA Vase in 2000, 2001. Quarter-finals of the FA Trophy in 1975-76. But I mentioned in the last video of this team because they've reached the fourth round of the FA Cup in 1975-76. On a separate occasion, they reached the third round in 1958-59. They also reached several times the second round and the first round. They were on, like, separate occasions. They were a huge team from non-league. Like, Tooting and Mitcham United have historically been one of the hugest teams. Like, they managed to draw a home tie against Crystal Palace, which had a side which included Terry Venables, Peter Taylor, Alan Whittle, and only lost 2-1. Right, that is quite something, you know, to manage to hold your own against some of the things. And they actually managed to draw 2-2 with Nottingham Forest at one point. Absolute mugs. Imagine drawing 2-2 with the Tooting and Mitcham side. And they're up against an AFC Croydon Athletic side, which is owned. I don't know if you knew this, but it's partly owned by Wilfred Zaha and Stormzy. So there's an interesting bit of trivia for you in that regard. They've only reached. They'll be able to equal their best FA Cup if they get through this one, reaching the first qualifying round, which will be the fourth time they've done so. They're really a side with not much history on it. But they are also a time. I mean, 1 minute. What James Dunn as a player on their books? Flipping heck. How have they managed to get away with that? Pape Souare. Flipping heck. They've managed to get some big name players from the past to come, haven't they? Using them Crystal Palace links, I see, fairly effectively. Flipping it. Like, I was not expecting that, you know. Getting a lot of former sort of Palace players. You can tell that link, you know. But Tooting and Mitcham, I think, will run out, and this will be an upset. 3-1 winners They got that pedigree in the FA Cup. You can't look past that. It's a specialist competition. We just this competition just revolves around them, and we are all just side pieces in their game. Hastings United versus Harrow Borough. Hastings United play at the Pilot Field, which is one of them really interestingly historic sort of grounds. You know, your proper old-fashioned non-league grounds that used to like have a speedway around it at one point. It was it had like 12,000 at one point. Watching a game against in the third round of the FA Cup against Norwich City, because they're also a huge team for their FA Cup exploits in the past. Like you know, I mean, they've reached the third round of the FA Cup in 3 different occasions: in 1953-54, 1954-55, and 2012-13. They've been right up there as being one of the best teams. They've won the Southern League before, like going on for that 2012-13 one. The biggest match potentially was against Middlesbrough, where they got knocked out 4-1 in the third round. But they're an absolutely huge team, right? Don't get me any wrong. That they're a team which, in this competition, have pedigree in just general, historically huge club. They're up against Harrow Borough, which won't be an easy one because they're also a team that has won the Isthmian League before. They reached the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup, and second round of the FA Cup rather, in 1983-84. Semi-finals on a replay of the FA Trophy in 1982-83. They're certainly a team that they've been a side which has had mixed history, certainly. I don't think they ever quite they didn't manage to be enable promotion to the Premier, like the Alliance Premier, despite winning the Isthmian League, because it wasn't actually the feeder league as it is now. So yeah, I'm going to go with a Hastings United 3-1 win. But yeah, could see an upset on that one. Corinthian Casuals versus Sevenoaks Town. If you know your football, you would know that Corinthian Casuals, there was an amalgamation of 2 very big teams historically in the FA Cup. Corinthian, which was a side which won the Sheriff of London Charity Shield. They reached the they've beaten some huge names before, such as beating Bury 10-3, by the way, before, and Blackburn 8-1. Like, that is actually mad. And then you've also got Casuals, which were a team that won the FA Amateur Cup in 1936. They were a team who were one of the very early days FA Cup players. Right, so they were both very early day pioneers in football, so to speak. And then actually this club, they've reached the combined one. They've reached the FA Amateur Cup finals before in 1955-66. Twice reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1965-66 and 1983-84. They've been in the Isthmian League, top flight for part of their history before. Certainly one of them ones which you'd suspect. But now they've got to do the upset against the Sevenoaks team that finished in 9th in the Isthmian League South East last season, has reached the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup in 2022-23. They are a team on the rise, possibly. I think they've become a bit mediocre, actually. But I think Corinthian Casuals can form an absolute upset here. 4-0. Horndean versus Laverstock and Ford. Horndean are doing things the right way. That's what I'm telling you now for absolutely nout. They're building a team that is very much capable of progressing. They were. This is the highest I've ever played, having got promoted for Isthmian League for the first time in 2022-23. They obviously, therefore, haven't had that much history in the FA Cup, only reaching second qualifying round as their best in 2023-24. So this could be a huge standout statement season. Laverstock and Ford are coming in to sort of cause an upset here. But they're a side which have also been improving on their own, only getting promoted via the playoffs to the West 16 League in 2021-22. I'm feasibly going to see Horndean winning this one 4-1. I just don't see Laverstock and Ford getting anywhere near it. Winchester City versus Bashley. Winchester City got relegated from Southern League South last season. Geographically, a huge area, Winchester, to potentially drag people upon. Reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup on 4 separate occasions and won the FA Vase before in 2003-04. There's certainly a side which has, ironically, though, actually at one point played by Ousmane Dembele, played football manager for the team. Like it was absolutely ridiculous. Like you know, in football manager tournaments, you get like I got Ousmane Dembele to play. I don't know why that happened, and I don't know where that link possibly came from. But they've been an interesting team. You know, they've been in the Southern League before, but they've also been in the Wessex League. They've been a bit all over the place, and they're up against a Bashley side. Sounds like one of the 7 dwarfs, doesn't it? Bashley have reached the second round of the FA Cup in 1994-95, where it was they only lost 1-0 at home to Swansea City. They've been a perennial person within the Southern League and the Isthmian League, you know. So, yeah, it could be an interesting one. I'm going 4-0 Winchester City, which is a bit of a bold call. Shaftesbury versus Thatcham Town. Shaftesbury are the ones who are in the higher position, having not been relegated last season, unlike Thatcham. They only got promoted from Wessex League, though, in 2023-24, and this is sort of the highest they've ever been. Their best in the FA Cup was 2021-22 in the second qualifying round. They've literally, historically, not been that huge of a club. So to now be the favourites against a Thatcham Town team, which got relegated from Southern League Division 1 South last season, who have been as a team which have been like one of the teams that I think they were in the Southern League Premier Division. Or I don't know if it was in the Premier League. They've certainly been in the 7-1 South for a long time. They used to have Charlie Austin used to play for them, by the way. If you are interested in that, they won the FA Vase before. Their best effort's been in 4 qualifying round of the FA Cup. Certainly, I think in terms of teams, Thatcham would usually be favourites, but that's now Shaftesbury, and I think Shaftesbury does win this one 2-1. Moneyfields versus AFC Portchester. A similar case in play here, but I think these two are probably about equal. Moneyfields is a side that have reached the third qualifying round of the FA Cup as their best time, so they've not been standout as some of the ones we mentioned. But in terms of they're a side of like they have only been around since 1987. They don't have the same history as others. They've only got promoted to the Isthmian League in 2023-24. So it's not as if they're a team that have a huge amount of history to lend on. But neither to Portchester, really, AFC Portchester, who their best run has been to the second qualifying round, that formed in 1971. they got promoted to the Isthmian League last season by winning the league. And this is the highest they've ever been. So like these two are definitely teams on my up. I'm going 4-2 Moneyfields. Bradford Town versus Westbury. Bradford Town are coming in as a team to make an upset. They were promoted via the playoffs of the Western League last season in Tier 10, They could definitely be one of the shock outfits of this one. The best they've ever done is the second qualifying round of the FA Cup. And I think this could be a plausibility on an upset, but I'm not sure. I think Westbury have proven themselves quite good over the recent years. They've managed to find themselves in the Southern League Division 1 South, having been in the Western League for most of their history. Do approve of a logo change. They reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1937-38, where, I mean, they were, yeah, I mean, they were a side which, that's probably the most notable bit in history, led by the captain, Billy Pearce. So yeah, 2-0 Westbury. We'll dive into it too much. Hythe and Dibdin versus New Milton Town. On to another newly promoted team, which we'll get to in a minute. Hythe and Dibdin are an interesting team in terms of being a very much only recent addition to the FA Cup as well. They've been in down in tier 14 and stuff, and they're a team on the rise at the moment. Highest they've gone through is the first qualifying round. I think they've only been in the Wessex League since 2021-22 with the COVID results promoting them, and so they're still looking for a really good FA Cup run at some point. And maybe they can do it against this one, against newly promoted New Milton Town, who won the Wessex League Division 1 last season. But they have also reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup 3 different times. They've reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 1998-99. They've been in the Isthmian League before. It's only recent history that has seen them fallen out of favour. But I am going to go Hythe and Dibdin to win this one 3-2. Exmouth Town versus Buckland Athletic. Buckland is definitely looking to cause an upset here because Exmouth reached the Southern League playoffs last season, losing the semi-finals 4-1 against Evesham United. They're a side which has really, they're a side which has been growing astronomically recently. They reached the fourth round of the FA Cup, fourth qualifying round rather, of the FA Cup in 1989, 88, 89 and 89, 90. They reached the FA Vars semi-finals in 1984-85. They are certainly a team which now in the Southern League, they'll be looking to continue. Where is their ceiling? Do let me know if you are an Exmouth fan. Where is the ceiling of your club? They're up against a Buckland Athletic team which were in the playoffs of the Western League last season. They're somebody who I think are equally on the rise. A lot of these teams in the Southwest are at the moment quarterfinalists of the FA Vars in 2016-17. Could potentially see them at some point being a rising star and ending up in the Southern League potentially. I'm going to go with a tight 1-1 draw, and I think Buckland Athletic calls the upset at home and win a replay. Barnstaple Town versus Tavistock. I'm going to say, but I mean, Western League playoffs contenders last season, they lost out in the semi-finals to Brixham 3-0 in the end, but decent side last season. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup on no less than 4 separate occasions in 1951-52, 1954-55, 1959-16, 1972-73. They've reached the fourth round of the FA Vars in 1994-95. They're certainly a team which have got history in this competition and will be looking to replicate a similar such thing this season. That's no doubt about that. But they're having to be hosts and causing an upset against the Tavistock side, which were in the Southern League Division 1 South last season. Only recently been Western League champions in 2021-22 and haven't been relegated since. And I think Another team on the up potentially. Not as got as much pedigree in the FA Cup. The best has been in the third qualifying round. I think in terms of this one, I'm going to go with a wacky 5-3 win for Barnstaple Town. Falmouth Town versus Bideford. Falmouth, well, in the Southern League Division 1 South, so it's one of them ones which they're one of the most successful teams in the Western League, to be honest. They've reached the first round of the FA Cup on 3 separate occasions, all within the 1960s. The quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 1996-87 and much more recently in 2023-24, a couple of seasons back. I think a team which I think is certainly building and going in the right direction is currently the highest level they're playing at. They've played in the last few seasons now, and they're up against the Bideford side, who've sustained themselves at this level, it must be said. Have actually gone ahead and been in the Premier Division of the Southern League before, between 2012-13 and 2015-16, reaching highs of 8th in that. So they've certainly grown in terms of that. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup on 4 separate occasions in 1964-65, 1973-74, 77-78, and 1981-82. Being in the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2003-4. It's a very difficult one to tell this one. I think it's going to be a fairly even game, a 2-2 draw with Falmouth Town to win the replay. Brixham versus Mosul. Brixham is a side which got promoted last season by playoffs to the Southern League Division 1 South, having also relatively recently been in the Southwest Peninsula League. So they are on a great run. They reached the 5th round of the FA Vase in 2022-23. Last season was their best run in the FA Cup, reaching the first qualifying round, and they'll be looking to do the same again, providing a very crucial opportunity up against Mosul, who is also see if they can now test their mettle, to be fair, against another side in the Southern League Division 1 South, who finished just outside the playoffs in 6th last season. Their best has been in the second qualifying round in 2023-24. They've also been a team that has been on the rise. They only entered the Western League in 2021 and only got promoted to the Southern League in 2022-23, which was only the second Cornish side to reach step 4 of a non-league pyramid. I'm going 3-0 Mosul, to be honest. And we'll do the final one is Enfield versus Biggleswade Town. We'll end on that one on the Sunday kickoff. Enfield, hugely historic club. That's why I've chosen them. They are now a reform club after all. But they won the FA. If we include the original club, they twice won the FA Amateur Cup in the 1960s, won the European Amateur Cup Winners' Cup in 1970-71, twice won the FA Trophy in the 1970s, were conference champions in 1982-83 and 1985-86, have regularly won the Isthmian League throughout their history as well. They've reached the 5th round of the FA Vase. They reached the 4th round of the FA Cup in 1980-81, where they drew 1-1 to Barnsley and then lost 3-0 in the replay. They are one of the, they to be fair, they are very unfortunate not to somehow received 7.5 votes when he had to apply for election, with those applying to retain their membership getting between 61 and 64 votes. It was a bit unfortunate because I think they definitely deserved to be elected into it, and Enfield for me is a side which is deeply, deeply historic, and it's a shame what really happened with that club. They're playing up against a Biggleswade Town, the Waders, who got relegated from the Southern League Premier Division last season, having been at that level for a fair few years now, I suppose. They reached the first round of the FA Cup in 2013-14, reached the 4th round of the FA Trophy in 2024-25, quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2008-9. Both of these are big heavyweights to be entering this early on. I'm going 2-1 at Biggleswade Town. I am absolutely exhausted. I need to have a drink. This is going to be the end of the video. We're going to have the Premier League predictions tomorrow evening. I'm going to do some shorts for the Derby County match. Filming my reaction to the crowd or whatever on Saturday But I'm knackered. This has been going on for 2.5 hours. Please subscribe if you are new around here, because I've been drained from it. But goodbye for now.